Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast exploring music, education, technology, and the intersections between them, with a special focus on the productive and creative process. I'm your host, Robby Burns. My guest this week is Krystal Williams. She teaches at Northwestern High School in Hyattsville, Maryland, and is the technology chair for the Maryland Music Educators Association. She joins the show to talk about a whole diverse list of tools, instructional and organizational strategies that she uses to teach in a variety of content areas ranging from band to music theory. It was an awesome discussion. I guess the first thing I should say actually is like how excited I am. This is my second, if you count the fact that my last two guests are the same person, this is my third Maryland guest. Maybe this is pretty biased to say, but like I feel like there are some pretty good teachers of music here in Maryland.
Yeah, Maryland has a strong cohort of teachers, a lot of seasoned teachers. So we tend to retain teachers, and we are very progressive in teaching methods. And I think that might be something that is probably drawing you to, with this podcast, is that we really, some of these things that during the pandemic people started to use, some of these things I've been doing for 10 years. So it's like, it wasn't new to many of us. Some of our districts, have been very progressive in using Google Classrooms, and well before people had to go to virtual or a hybrid model.
Right. Yeah. There's so many people, there's so many influences in the area of technology and outside of just people who have like great teaching pedagogy, who are big influences of mine, all within the state. I feel like I could do every episode of the show and just have different people from only Maryland come on, and it would still be like best in class topics and discussion every week because of just how many great people there are, doing what we do. So I guess before we get too far, I should just say, Krystal Williams, welcome to the show. Do you want to do, I always will just kind of throw this at the guest. Do you want to kind of give a brief introduction to yourself, who you are, what you've have some different career stuff going on this year, not totally different from what you did last year, but you want to talk about your most current music teaching engagements and your most recent ones before that, a little bit of how you got started with music and technology, or whatever you want to say about yourself.
Absolutely. I am a Prince George's County native. A lot of people think I'm from Baltimore. I actually came to Baltimore in 1999. I'm dating myself to start undergrad at Morgan State, and I did the whole marching band thing, and I majored in music. Principal, my primary instrument is clarinet or woodwinds, and then I went to grad school back at Morgan for conducting, and I got my master's in music education from the College of Notre Dame, which is now the University of Notre Dame. And I started my teaching career in Baltimore City Schools, which I taught in Baltimore City Schools up until this year, 15 years. It was the only district, you get hired your first gig, and I taught on every level, elementary, middle, and finally high school. And for most of those years, I've been a high school band director at the oldest all-girl public high school in the nation. And I just recently transferred, back home to Prince George's County Schools. I am currently now teaching music theory for the visual and performing arts program at Northwestern High School in Hyattsville, Maryland.
That's awesome. There's so much about what you just described. I also have been teaching middle school band, most of my career. It's been my dominant thing for most of my career, all of it actually. And I just it's just interesting to see what makes people who do specifically band, because there's I don't know, I feel like there are certainly some stereotypes about band people, and I don't feel like thinking about how technology can engage with your students is necessarily one of them. There's a lot of tradition in the band world, so I kind of that. I mean, but it's always the way I've been thinking, because it's I feel like it's born out of an interest in doing what's going to engage your students the most, and that seems to be a common thread in your current position and in what you've been doing. Is you don't really appear, given by the stuff in your background, your desk, you don't appear to stop asking the question what more can I be doing to make this a better experience.
And it's interesting. I fell into technology. I didn't study technology. I think it's so funny. If you've asked me 15 years ago, would I be on a podcast talking about technology? absolutely not. I married my husband for a reason. He's the techie guy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, like any relationship, some of that is going to kind of leak onto you. You know, you're going to get that residue, because to have a conversation with someone techie, you have to know the language. You have to have some type of knowledge base. And so I started with technology, trying to enhance the learning experiences for my band students. And my last position, the high school, I felt grossly outnumbered in every way, and outsourced. Like, I just didn't have the resources that I felt like other districts have in Maryland. You know, I have a unique population of students with a lot of disadvantages, and really technology, I was just trying to find a way to even the playing field. And that's what technology became in my classroom. We can't do private lessons. Most of my students couldn't afford private lessons. It's not even a conversation. And yeah, you can get grants and stuff. But then I just started looking at, well, YouTube, I call it YouTube University. Mm-hmm. It started with trying to get my percussionists, you know, to keep them moving at the same pace as the rest of my band ensemble. We know how percussion can get.
Yes.
They start to stare at the wall, and then after that, they start to do things you don't want them to do, because that engagement piece isn't there. And so I started finding YouTube videos and creating, you know, folders and folders of links. And I would, you know, put it on the board, or I would text it to them. And I started using things like the Remind app. And that was my first technology integration, was copy link here, go in the hallway and learn all of your rudiments. Now, I was joking to myself, like, they're not going to go out there and learn all their rudiments. They're going to go out there and do something else. And then I saw it working. And I was like, whoa, you mean I don't actually have to teach you a skill? And so that expanded to, you know, more like having these little, you know, a YouTube page, instructional page. And we're talking like 2011, where people weren't really thinking like that. And I would just send links and send the link to my page and say, okay, woodwinds, this is, you know, a demonstration of this, instead of having someone come in who's an expert or a clinician, which I couldn't afford. YouTube University became the place of clinics and skill development. And then I said, well, I can flip this. Students can send me a video of them doing these things, and they don't even have to be in my presence. So that allowed me to have group work where there was some accountability. I said, okay, you've been in the hallway for 10 minutes. I expect to see at least 5 rudiments. I expect to see that you can play 5 notes. And this video is now my assessment. So I was flipping the classroom before it was kind of like a word, or it was a practice that now people are trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's like it's a buzzword now.
Yeah, it's a buzzword now. I didn't know what I was doing. I just was trying to, like I said, duplicate myself in a way where everybody could keep moving, because I was trying to close a egregious achievement gap. And it was because of access. 99% of my students, even up until I left, were always high school beginners. So you imagine, we just can't compete with a district that students start in the 5th grade, 6th grade. I would give a survey every year. This was using Google Forms before it was popular. And I would give a survey to find out how many students had previous music education experience. And it was sad. And it would make me feel like I can't fix this just by myself, and I don't have the money to fix this. So it just became innovative ways to close a gap that actually started to produce something.
Yeah, a lot of people think of resources and being under-resourced as like having money or stuff, but I feel like one of the most obvious ways that a school can like not have enough resources is just people in the building. And you're describing like, how do you think outside of the box and ask the question, well, like, okay, I don't have the amount of time or like student to teacher ratio that is going to help these kids learn. So how do I basically make more of me? Which,
yeah, you're just trying to clone yourself.
Right.
And then I found that in doing so, students were able to have some self-efficacy that you often don't see in beginners. There's a lot of hand-holding that happens on the early developmental stage of developing a musician. You know, there's a lot of modeling that has to happen. And very quickly, my students kind of owned the classroom because they didn't necessarily depend on me for every single piece of information. And my answers would quickly be, oh, Miss Williams, how do you finger B flat? Don't you have that app for clarinet fingerings? And then I would just leave it, which then turned to the cell phone. So I already told you my first piece of technology was the Remind app. Right. And instead of sending messages, I had students sign up and sending them links. And then it turned into, oh, they all have a phone. And this was that battle of the cell phone in classroom. You know, they put it on the music stand, you hear it buzzing, you see it light up like a Christmas tree. You know, iPhones have that, you know, I call it that very pulsive light. Mm-hmm. They turn the notifications off, but now I'm losing engagement. And that's what it's all about, is engagement. How do I have continuous? Well, they're engaged in their phone. And we did an experiment where I was teaching a band, I was teaching a piece of repertoire that they knew. And every time their phone had an alert, they had to come up to the board, stop doing whatever they were doing, even if it was a middle song, and just put a little tally mark. Mm-hmm. I kid you not, we were about halfway through the class and it was about 300 tally marks. I said, they can't be concentrating with this. It's classical conditioning at this point. Every time they see that blink, and I said, how do I use that against them? I know it sounds sneaky. Yeah. And so I said, okay, you can keep your phone out as long as you don't ask me questions about fingerings. You're always into, when it's time to tune, you've already tuned. Like, it started that self-advocacy, and I'm gonna hold you to it. And so I started allowing students to use their cell phone a lot. And, you know, I had an evaluation where one of the admin came in and she was kind of startled, but she said, I walked around and they were actually looking up things on how to play something better. And not, of course, there was always rules like, once we start playing, you know, phone gets flipped down, put beside your chair. And if it's not flipped down, then I have to take away participation points. But she was like, they're actually not texting on their phone. I said, no, they're not. She's like, how long did it take you to do this? I said, well, it had to become a normal classroom practice, a routine that a lot of people are afraid of, because they're like, if I do that, they're just going to use it for the wrong thing. I said, no, they won't. They'll be actually more engaged. And so the cell phone, and then it went to glorious smart music.
Yeah, well, actually, you bridged. So I have a question for you. You bridged it right there. So like you're kind of like bouncing between. You're solving a lot of the same kinds of problems creatively, but there are kind of two categories that I often think about software. There's like the district school system kind of mandated stuff where we are resourced, you know, pretty much at the will of our school system, like what they can afford, where they decide to prioritize. And then they can, of course, they can put that in the hands of every student if that's something that they have decided that they're going to invest the money in. But then there's this like whole other much broader area of technology, which is an area that until last year is far more interesting to me because I control it. And it's like, what's the me facing stuff? Like, how do I use tools that maybe I are even not even something a student uses, maybe I just use, or something that's like not district mandated, but that's going to get that extra engagement and management happening in the classroom. So like, how do you kind of reconcile this need to have, because you're about to, I'm assuming smart, well, maybe I shouldn't assume, is smart music something that the school system paid for?
Well, initially, you know, pre-pandemic, and smart music wasn't even like something like people really knew about. I learned about smart music because my college professor, Melvin and Miles, was teaching a trumpet lesson to a senior. And this is when smart music was on like a CD. And I just came in the middle of the lesson, maybe to get a music folder or something. And it like caught my attention. I said, is this why he plays so well? Here's the repertoire right there. Like I felt cheated because here's this piece of technology that's like, this guy could play. He went to North Texas. He's like a college professor now. And I was just like, man, how do I get a hold? But I just assumed it was something that a director had to have. And so I went to a clinic and they were doing a demo on smart music. I said, oh, there's that technology from at the time. Now it's like 4 or 5 years later, and I'm in my first year teaching. And I said, whoa, how can I use this? Like, first it came out selfishly. Like, I wasn't even thinking about students having that kind of piece, like you're saying. It was for me. It was for me to have access to repertoire I couldn't afford. Listening examples, I was looking at it for me as the conductor, as the band director. How can I not burn up the copy machine? It was really selfish. It was like, oh, I don't have a copy machine in my department, and we don't have paper, but I can put this on my projector which was, a whiteboard. It wasn't like a Promethean board. It was like a projector I bought, and I brought it to school, and I just hooked up the HDMI cord to my laptop. And then I said, I can log into Smart Music and I can throw rhythmic examples on the board for everyone. And I didn't have to print 27 worksheets or in that time, 90.
Right. Yeah. It's a really common way that a lot of elementary school teachers I know will use it, is like if they're teaching in this kind of style where you like have little small instrument groups, they'll like just put the teacher account on the screen and then use it as play along material, interactive play along material. And you're hitting all my buttons, because like making two of myself and making play along material are like two of my biggest, most successful strategies this year as a teacher. And anywhere you can like plug into more play along material, I think is a good thing. And Smart Music has got, I mean, they're like they're like, of all the self-assessment tools online, they're the ones with the content library.
Yeah.
And I know some others are catching up, but yeah, it's big. It's real big.
And so then I found out there were teacher subscriptions, and then like I was heartbroken, because I was like, oh, there's that price that I don't have it. Like, I was taking a hit on the teacher subscription. And I said, well, this will be my annual write-off. The district was nowhere near using technology for our subjects. Like you said, band, choir, the performance-based, we've been traditionalists up until the pandemic, and even still traditionalists. Like, I can't wait to get back in person so I can go back to normal. And as soon as that started to be the thing, I said, I have to kind of start doing clinics on why this works. And the problem with the pandemic, it doesn't work when you don't have time to play with it. So my advantage is I've had 10 years, now 11 years to play with it. But for someone who's forced into it with all these pieces of technology, it's really difficult to maneuver. You haven't grown with it. You just were forced into it. And anything, of course, we know new can be uncomfortable, and technology can heighten that, especially if you feel like you're not tech savvy, which is why I always start clinics with saying, I was the least tech savvy person ever. It wasn't really that I went to school for it, or I was even thinking in this manner. I was never really interested in it until there was a need to, like you said, duplicate myself, and having access to materials that I couldn't afford. And, people talk about, well, that subscription is expensive. So here's how I solved the problem. I was charging band fees. I think the band fees were about $60 a year. And I think the subscriptions were about $30 or $40. I said, well, I can write grants for reads and have a donors choose running all year for basic supplies.
Yeah.
And those are really easy to get funded. But I probably would have a hard time getting student subscriptions paid for. So it became a part of the band fee. I didn't say it was for technology. I just said, this is part of the band fee. And, it was itemized like, oh, this goes to that, and that. But really, everybody had a subscription. And if I had some outliers that couldn't afford it, it was really easy to get some alum to like sponsor a kid's Smart Music subscription. It's $40 for the whole year. It's like, and we could give you a tax write-off for that from the school.
Yeah.
And that was how I solved it.
Yeah. So many people are already requiring like method books or, some kind of like sheet music material at the beginning of the year. I do know one or two teachers who have gone to that, like kind of buying a seat rather than a method book, because Smart Music, amongst some of these other platforms, some of them have some of these like really popular band method books inside of them. So it's like, it just becomes the replacement for the book, which I think is pretty smart.
And that's exactly what I looked at. I said, I don't have to buy the method books. And to be honest, we know what kids do with the method books. The cover is gone by the third week, and they leave it at home. So you're in class and you don't have enough method books for a student who's left it at home, or you have students with very unique home situations where it's not that they are being negligent, it's that they're in an environment that's not so conducive to being a young developing musician. And I didn't want to blame them ever for not having what they needed. So this became, well, you know, if you stay after school, I'm after school for about an hour. I cleared out the practice rooms. They were kind of just a place for junk. And I got like 3 school computers with just enough RAM to run old school smart music. And I would say, just go in the practice room and that's your practice sheet. And it became the replacement for practice sheets.
Right. Actual playing. I mean, that's the thing with practice sheets that eventually made me stop doing them, was like, okay, yeah, I'm just like encouraging you and your families to lie to me. What?
and being a kid that I like to practice, but sometimes my parents didn't want to hear it, especially in the beginning. And I just remember my mom like filling in like the whole week. I didn't practice that long. And she's just like, here, you need it for a grade. Here you go. Please stop.
One of the things that finally made me realize the damage I was doing with practice sheets was when a student of mine, an 8th grader, wrote his own video game called Mr. Burns. And in the game, you had to run away from an angry face that was trying to collect your practice chart.
I mean, the idea was fine, but it was missing true accountability.
Right.
And that's what smart music really gave: true accountability and grade validation. And I started doing smart music clinics for my former district. And I remember everybody's eyes rolling in their head. Like, this is like maybe now 8 years ago. And I was like, look at this. And then the questions, I can't afford this. I said, how much do you spend on method books a year? And I was like, how much do you spend on your sheet music a year? And then it started to kind of look at the price difference. And I would just have them tally up. You need 3 pieces for band assessments, and you need at least 1 set of method books for your class, at least a class set of 30. You've already paid for smart music times 5. And that kind of would change people's thought process. And then it came to will students use it? And this is the pushback I always hear with like smart music. Students, well, they don't practice anyway. Are they going to use this? I said, well, the thing is, you have to not go back and forth with technology. Students are smart. Go figure, students actually have intelligence, especially when there's a way to get out of something. Yes. And so you have to be always troubleshooting what can be the excuse for why I didn't. And so I thought about how long you give students to do a practice sheet. A week, right? I said, okay. So this is 1 grade. You can turn them in late, but you have to now double the time next week.
Right.
And then they're like, oh. And then there's that wonderful little graph in the practice, like in smart music. There's this wonderful graph that students can see their documented time. So now what I do is I have students take a screenshot, because I still have band students. Like, I'm not completely free of band. Actually, all of my theory students are instrumentalists. Okay. And it's sprinkled. So I'm still a band director. Like, a lot of people like, I don't get it. You left band. I was like, not really. Just different focus. But my students, they have to take a screenshot of their practice, and it's easy for them because they don't have to write. We know band kids don't want to write things down. That's sometimes why they're in there. They're like, oh, it's a class where I don't necessarily have to have paper and pen, or always kind of answering in a formal sense like my English class. So I say, send me a screenshot of your practice sheet and submit it on the Google form.
Yeah, that's the strength and the challenge of using these digital platforms. Is like what I found last year was I was getting resistance from having students turn in so much work through video recordings and through note sound check and note flight is what we learned a little bit last year. And I'm trying to think, I'm like, why am I getting this resistance? And it finally dawned on me that like some of these students have never actually had to take their instrument out of the case at home and then immediately get that feedback of like credit for an assignment. It's always like this way long extended payoff that's not always so concretely associated with a numerical score in the gradebook. And I think that really, tested them, but it held them accountable also. Like it's not like you can, get participation credit for class and float by. It's like you actually have to take out the instrument and record it into the computer, or else because the result of not doing it is not like a B or a C. It's like a 0. You get a 0 for all the work you did not even attempt to do. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's cool to see that you're building this whole system around, doing all the things that a lot of people are doing with paper, doing that in the cloud.
And I call it the training wheels do eventually come off, where my beginners, I was relentless about making sure that they had that accountability. But then like my seniors, they had an option of whether or not they purchased smart music. Like I gave them the option, but I did shape it in this way. I said, those of you who are auditioning for college, everything you need is already there. And that feedback that I might not have time to give you, just being transparent, is there. And you can use that as a tool to do solo ensemble, which we used smart music for solo ensemble entries last year. All of my seniors participated. And in the district I'm in, we were well over 90% of the entries for solo ensemble because they knew how to find the concert and contest book. They knew how to select a piece of repertoire. They knew how to download that Excel sheet and pick something and listen to whether they like it or not. And they could make those choices as seniors. And then I said, listen, that same video that you're going to submit, you didn't have to pay for accompanist. It's already there. That's what you put it on a YouTube page and you send that link to every place you're auditioning. And whereas a lot of kids will have to like go in person, if you are not a student, like I deal with a lot of first generation college students. I'm a first generation college student. Sometimes your parents just don't get it when it comes to what it's going to take to be a music major. And so that leveled the playing field for a lot of them is that they could have all the things they needed to be successful, at least to get through to and through an audition process. And being virtual really leveled the playing field for them because that was the only submission that a lot of people were taking. There was no face-to-face, but they knew how to operate the technology. They knew how to record themselves through practice in class. We would have juries and digital juries. I would put all the class students' names in a Google form. It takes maybe less than 5 minutes, copy the roster, paste it, and then leave a adjudication sheet that's kid friendly, where it says superior, excellent, fair, poor, and then just write one sentence giving them feedback on their performance. And we had virtual juries last year, but we were having those same type of juries in place with the technology. It just now was in a virtual space. Same method, just, not face to face.
Yeah, I like this idea of actually, so using it to help facilitate solo ensemble music is really interesting because, I've been sort of like creating like a homegrown Canvas walkthrough to help my students decide this. And our numbers have gone way up for enrollment ever since I basically created this Canvas assignment page that like links out to lots of different options for them. It has this, my colleague guest on the last 2 episodes, Ben Denny, made this whole like flow chart of like how to help you decide, like, do you think you could play this for 10 minutes a day for the next 2 months and not be bored of it? If not, choose something harder. And the second you find that thing that's too hard, where it's like, can you like play this through on a first time through and like maybe get, it sounds kind of musical. If so, maybe this is a good fit. Now search this on YouTube. Can you find at least 3 recordings on YouTube? If not, go back to the beginning again. So it's like really helps you walk it through, but I've never thought about actually that probably some of that rep is in the Smart Music catalog for like listening to and modeling and even like attempting to play for some note feedback. That's something I need to give some thought for the future.
And it really solved the accompaniment issue because that for years was actually just coming from my pocket. Didn't have a band budget to even pull that from. So there was this function that actually a private studio instructor showed me was the follow me function. I said, well, how do you account for like adjusting tempo? And the follow me function, the student could play and it would actually mirror and wait for those sound bites to start it up again from a fermata. And I was like, what? I was like blown away. I was like, you actually put the accompanist in the room with you. And it also teaches students how to control that part, because there's always that solo part where you have to communicate with the accompanist. And, what I learned in college is you can have a bad accompanist that's just going to play it the way they want to play it. And having that level of ownership changed the game. Do I have sharing rights?
Oh, I can make you have them.
It's one thing to talk about. Technology is another thing to actually show it. So this is their weekly practice sheet. And it's always the same. So I just set it so they can use the same link. So they don't have to hunt for this link. It's the same link, bookmark it. And their names are in there. They just drop down to their instrument. And this was because we were preparing for solo ensemble, since we were talking about it. And, what have y'all decided? Are you doing a solo? Are you going to do a small ensemble, both? Then we have music that they have been prepping, a place in there. So this also helps drive my instruction, because it's information they may not feel comfortable saying in class. Like, hey, Ms. Williams, I can't play measure 27. Tell me what are the areas that you think you need to work on. And you can see we're playing some pretty tough stuff right now. And, things like, do you have an instrument at home? That's information that I need to know. Maybe your instrument's in the shop and you haven't told me because you're afraid to say that I don't have an instrument at home. And then there's this practice evidence. Just send me a 5-minute video. This is the whole week, but just a 5-minute video of what you need to work on the most. And that's that thing I did not have as a college student, is how to practice effectively.
I barely knew how to do that until I had a master's degree in performance.
Right. You go in there and you play the things that make you feel good. And then you avoid the measures that don't make you feel good. And then you go back to your private lesson, and you haven't gotten any better.
And I tell them, I'm like, there is some importance to getting more comfortable with certain things musically that you like to play. Like in drumming, I'm a percussionist. Drum set being a part of like a lot of my private students' lives. It's like you do like the music has to groove. So like if you just really like sneaking into some groove or some pocket or some feeling, that's really good, because that consistency is important. But like the other, like the 10% of the music that is not the groove, you got to spend like more than 10% of your practice time working on it, or else you're going to have breaks, you're going to have gaps.
So that's that focus, like teaching them how to be a smarter musician, and that actually makes you better. We're used to our all-star students. Like you said, we're used to the student that just kind of gets it. But then there's always that kid that's been hiding behind first trumpet or second, and they sit on the end of the row and they believe that their third part doesn't matter. And they get very confident in hiding. And so I've kind of removed it. So everybody kind of has some sense of self-efficacy at their level. And that's what differentiation is, right? That's that part that it's hard for us to kind of conquer on paper when we have evaluations. I can quickly defend that the students have choice over what they're working on, because they said they need to work on measure 27. And they turned in a video about measure 27. And I didn't tell them that's what they needed to work on. And I know for our evaluations in Maryland, that elusive, highly effective is hard to get if there's no self-efficacy from the student and you haven't become the facilitator.
Yeah, it's so interesting to define what that is, because it's like, you know it when you see it, but like so much of our job in the beginning, especially in the performing arts, is to like try to almost anticipate what they're hearing or not hearing, and then try to like resolve those skills in a large rehearsal. But we're seeing more and more teachers who are taking even that large rehearsal environment where there might be like 60 or 70 kids, and they're thinking of ways to get the kids to be the ones who are making more of the decisions in the classroom.
And of course, there's that selfish part, where you want to be evaluated well. Your pay is tied into it. Some districts, you know, whether you get to move up the ladder. And so when Google Suite became something the district paid for, I was all the way, I said, oh, great. I can put my lessons in Google Slides. I moved from PowerPoints to Google Slides. And when they say, do you have the objective on the board? If you're looking at the screen, yep. Do you have, you know, an agenda of the entire lesson? This is what my students see every single day in my class. They know, and I post them usually on Sunday night. So if a student is sick, let's talk COVID, because that's just where we are right now. We're dealing with the revolving door. I know I am, of students in and out your classroom. Mm-hmm. These Google Slides have the videos already there. It's just copying, pasting links. I know a lot of people like, I don't have time to do this. I said, I have yet to have an administrator ask me for my lesson plan, because they know they can just go to the Google site and literally see that class's lesson in real time. Just everything that they would want to be able to see, they have right there. And so I'm getting I've been consistently getting 4s evaluation. And when I say I am not nearly working as hard as I was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago now, I'm just not. And I think sometimes when we think about integrating technology, we think it's going to be time consuming. And you have this question about what's a tech tip? Don't use more than 3. Find 3 things that you can use consistently, the most uses out of it. And so for me, it's been Google Suite. Anything Google Suite. I learned how to operate forms very well, Google Slides, and build a Google site. And everything is a spin-off from that.
Google really, it rewards, I've said this on here before because I've had a couple of guests who are real, like all in on Google. Google, like any one of these big tech platforms, rewards you for how all in you are on it. And our district, Howard County, has like really, like we are all in on Google Docs. It's like the primary document and collaboration piece of technology across all school-wide, team-wide, music-wide, you know, collaboration. Our music team uses some other stuff that's not used by the district, but like you can like sort of get more benefits by going all in. And this which you're showing on the screen here is like this is another way of creating another version of yourself, because like you can even none of the versions of yourself that you can like create with technology, or if you're out for a day, like there's still this is like something you've left them. And I can't say that I've made like a ton of this kind of modular stuff in our learning management, but I did sub for a teacher last week and was like just completely blown away that she had like pretty much recreated her curriculum inside of Canvas, and then like the lesson plan was pretty much students work through at their own pace. Here's a couple of like, here's the roster for attendance. And I was like, whoa, like this is great for me, obviously, but it's also really great for them, because like your sequence is continuing whether you're there or not.
And I've been quarantined a couple of times. I had COVID after Thanksgiving. That was my second bout with COVID, and then started the revolving door of students as well. That duplicating yourself, like that independent practice, really is helpful. Like when substitutes where the students already trained to know where to go. And this is what it is. Like the students are trained to know where to go. They don't ask, you know, those type of questions like, I don't know what we're doing when, you know, that's always that one of those observation things. And I used to evaluate teachers in my district, music teachers, and I'll come in and I'm like, okay, the kids come in and they still aren't on autopilot. And that's because they aren't either held accountable to doing something on their own, or you haven't figured out how for it to be engaging enough for them to do it on their own, but easy access. The MusicFirst apps changed the game for me. That's my favorite piece. That's the technology that's allowed me to have data, ongoing data on my students. And, you know, you and I both know that's the word of the day when it comes to education. And so I very quickly can prove student achievement, or if a student's actually doing what they're supposed to do. You know, when you have those parent conferences, I log into my MusicFirst account. I've been using Musician for theory. general theory and general music knowledge. And I can just click on their name and pull up an entire list of assignments they've done.
Do you
And
use the learning? Yeah, yeah. Do you use the learning management stuff in there as well? Like the okay. Do you have Canvas or Blackboard or any of these also?
No, I'm just using Google. We are switching to Canvas next year.
Okay. Do you have a learning management system that the whole district is using now?
Yes. So we're using School Max.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Yep.
I have not used it. I just know that like Canvas is they're all terrible, but Canvas is the least terrible.
Canvas is the least terrible. And that's the one that I'm really happy we're going to Canvas and we're leaving School Max. In Baltimore City, we were using Parent Portal, but Parent Portal integrates with Google Classroom. So if you grade it in Google Classroom, you could export.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't know that Google Classroom does export to a lot of grading programs, but you have to know how to set it up. And a lot of districts don't know you can. And so that's that burden of technology where it's great for organization of information, but you're like, I'm doing double grades. And that's what I have to do.
Yeah. Well, you have to manually create the links. And that's the thing is, I guess I say we're all in on Google, but we're actually not, because like we could, like, for example, we pay for Outlook email, and I'm like, why do we do that when we could just get Gmail? And then we don't use Google Classroom. And I'm sure I've never used Google Classroom. I know that Canvas has ripped off a lot of their user interface design, but I've got to imagine it's a little easier to to use a Google Doc as an assignment, like, tool inside of Google Classroom.
It all integrates. Every single thing integrates. So like, just for instance, this is the band's Google Classroom. And I even learned, like, even setting it up so it's not chaotic. And I think that's one of the things that people get, like, this is the probably most basic setup I have. Like, if you look at this date and then you go back to here, you see week 20. So there's like this vertical alignment of Ms. Williams, I wasn't here on week 19. And then I go back one slide, I say, well, look here. And here's all the assignments that you need to do. The end. Or like resources. Here's a link to your smart music subscription. If there's a substitute there and then they're a music person, they can get into smart music if they would like to go that far. And then like my theory classes, those are the most in-depth because of what I need them to do in the theory classes. But just organized by every week, every lesson. And since grades are due, this is such a trick because everybody says students turn in work after the deadline. I literally changed the title to close. and they're not that tech savvy that they'll see that title and say, oh, okay, I can't turn it in anymore. And they haven't tested that theory. But Google Classroom links with MusicFirst. So if I create an assignment in MusicFirst apps, you can sync it and they have their unit test and the link is there. So and I gave a retake of an assessment, and I call them redemptions, but just that, oh, I did bad on it. Well, here's the redemption link. And here's the test link. And here's this link. And all of these MusicFirst links. And as soon as they do it, it says, it turns in. So the kid, they didn't even have to do anything but do the assignment. Because there is that fight of getting them to actually turn things in, right?
Yep.
So using those MusicFirst apps, that changed the game. Once I learned how to link it, I said, oh man, I could just have a whole curriculum at their fingertips that I don't have to grade. I don't grade these things. They're self-grading.
Yeah. I'm looking at this now. They've changed this a little bit since I last really dug in. This is so much prettier than Canvas. Yeah. So
I'm a little brokenhearted because I don't want to Canvas.
But sure. So this is another example, though. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is another example of a thing where this is not like really something that your district requires you to use or even encourages you to use. You've like sort of like made your own homegrown Google Classroom that sort of talks to your actual learning management.
Yep.
Which is not unlike, I mean, it's funny because like learning management software, even the nicest ones sometimes have too many layers of abstraction. I'm like rebuilding a lot of my, like so much of the content that I put in there is just like descriptions of assignments and video, YouTube reference videos, audio recordings. Like really for me, like the only thing I need the Canvas for is the grading and then like the link out to the external tool. So I'm like starting to rebuild. I know I keep talking about craft. It's really nice. I'm starting to rebuild a lot of this like informative stuff in craft and then like link out to that because it's so much easier to make it in a native application rather than like being on a website. But you've done this here, of course, with an actual learning management system, which is cool. How does this or does it not talk to the one that's what did you say is the name of the one?
Sure. Schoolmax, it doesn't. And that's my kryptonite
okay.
right now. If we want to say there's a kryptonite, Schoolmax doesn't talk to anything. And right. So I do have to go to click on the grade category. However, I'm not, the items are already graded, especially if it's a MusicFirst app assignment where it already had like a scoring guide or it self-scores. And so at least all I'm doing is looking at their names and the grade for that and just punching in numbers, which even is a lot quicker than here's like, I used to use the Alfred's Theory books, complete theory method. You got to look at that and you have to tally it, you have to grade it. And then the students have to turn it in. And we already know what that looks like. And then I have to put that in the online management system and give them the worksheet back. And then that student loses it. And then you're in a parent teacher conference where a kid says, I turned it in. I'm like, no, but then you don't have your evidence. And so there is a little bit of that covering yourself, you know, and this is the conversation we don't like to talk about, but there is the sense of, I call it the attack on teachers sometimes, where you feel like you're always trying to prove that you're actually doing everything you need to do for your students. And so having this management, having like that, these apps built in to my own kind of management system, when it's time to have those uncomfortable conversations, I can say, this is how easy it is for your child to do their work. And everybody in class knows this. And then I get the questions like, well, our Chromebook doesn't work. And I said, every single app here works on your phone. And then then it gets quiet because then I say, I know your child has a phone. I see it every day. You mean they can do their tests from their phone? I said, they can do it on the bus on the way home. Then they kind of say, they can cheat. I was like, yep. Yeah, they could.
It's never been easier. But it would be done. Yeah, it's never been easier. I was just talking to a teacher in the copy room just a few days ago who I know uses a lot of technology. Lightspeed is one thing I know in particular that she uses because when my students come to sectionals from her class, there'll be music I've shared online that's blocked. And so I know that she's like power using the technology to like, you know, make sure that they're completely inattentive and focused on every one of her goals at every time. And I'm like, and how does that work? And she's like, oh, they still find ways to make excuses for not doing the work. And I'm like, how? It's all, you've like really just like spoon fed it to them on this like digital level. But yeah, having the phone is great. And the phone is something that is, I mean, this is the thing is like the phone, okay, not everyone has a phone, but most people have a web browser. And I think that that's why all this web stuff is interesting. And I think if you were not using one of these kinds of learning management systems before the pandemic, most likely your school system is now. And I think this is going to be an interesting space to observe in the future, because I think web stuff on the web, like can potentially talk to other things on the web really, really easily. The problem is like, how easily does it do it? Like how many steps do you as the teacher have to go through to link up stuff? And I'm hoping that now that everyone has we're all using this web software, that these companies are going to start to figure out ways to develop their software that it can more naturally talk to the other things. Because like even for example, using like external tools in Canvas is like sometimes you have to like go get a secret key from deep inside the settings of the external tool. Sometimes the students, it's like really abstracted. Like the kids, like sometimes if we're using like web app X, the kids will go to like x.com and think that they can get to it and use their same login information, but it's actually authenticated through Canvas. They have to click on the link that I've linked in Canvas because there's some magic sauce that happens on the way.
And that's one that I had to like figure out as well for like the district's MusicFirst account. Because initially when I got it, it was just I subscribed, I bought the account and distributed, to my music department because I was a department chair. And I said, well, listen, we all can use this and it will make life easier. And it did. But like for instance, Soundtrap has an app. It works okayish on your phone, right? It's not perfect. But if you have an education subscription, and then you could also have your own personal Soundtrap account, they don't talk to each other, even if you use the district distributed email. And I have a student who ran into that problem. So when I built out my Google site this year, because I still have the one from Baltimore City that I left up as a resource for my fine arts coordinator, my former fine arts coordinator, because I felt like this is something other people probably could use. So let's just leave it up. But if you notice, like my Soundtrap, it says Soundtrap education login. There's the link. This is the link. Or like the PG County Public Schools MusicFirst apps. This link is specific to not the one. And, students are creatures of habit. They click on the link once. And in class, during kind of like our drill in the first weeks of school, every time they open one of these links, I say, okay, bookmark it. Now it's at the top of your tab. Now we don't have to deal with you going to MusicFirst, which will send you to a demo page. And you'll say, I couldn't do my work because it sent me here. And so a lot of that does have to become a part of your routines and procedures. And that's why my advice is use three things that are easy for you to use that you can teach your students how to use effectively too. I think one of the biggest downfalls or pitfalls from virtual teaching was rolling out too many things at once. And that's why now people have kind of regurgitated a lot of things like, I won't use that ever again. I won't use smart music ever again. I won't use this. Because you rolled out so many things.
Yeah, it's like fatigue. It's like instant fatigue.
Yeah. So ultimately, people say, you're doing a lot. Actually, I'm using Google Suite. And that's just Google Classroom and a Google site and Google Slides, but that's part of the suite. I'm using MusicFirst apps and I'm using Smart Music. That's my 3. But your 3 might be using Google Forms effectively, students learning how to share that link, using Flipgrid, and maybe using Soundtrap. That's your 3. Does that mean that that's all you're using to teach? No, there's a lot of hands-on that's still happening in my class. And you as a band director know, there's still me on the podium, right? There's still me explaining how to articulate. There's still me explaining how to make a good entrance and a cutoff. Those things cannot be replaced by technology. I think some people are like, well, if you do all this, it's replaced. I was like, no, it's just enhanced. But at the end of the day, I still know how to tune a B flat. And so
that's the enhancement that I think is so attractive about technology, because you can become like a superhuman, with this stuff, or like even just make more of yourself. I mean, my thing with the making more of yourself is like, I love to have these super loud, justly in tune drones and like drum beats happening throughout my band rehearsal. And we got a headset, a Shure wireless headset, to help hear us through the masks. And I can just like have an iPad with my sheet music and my seating chart on half, and be taking all sorts of informal data with an Apple Pencil on like posture, but I'm also like be correcting it, at the same time, and like high-fiving kids at the door and helping kids try on dress shirts. And there's just like all this play along material, keeping the rehearsal moving forward. So like, I don't even have to be on the podium. Like actual me can be making like different kinds of connections. And that's like a bunch of stuff that is like anyone can install on a personal computer. Anyone can install Band in a Box or Logic or GarageBand, which is where I, make a lot of this stuff. And you don't need to have like a giant mixer like we have. You could just have like one really decent loud speaker with your headset and your phone plugged into it. But it's just like, I don't know. People like to really grip onto this idea. This is what I was saying about being traditional earlier. Is like, I think that feeling of like that you have to like that all the good, like a lot of that good musical making comes from in person. It can't be replaced by technology. I totally agree with that. But I do think that like some things can be replaced. Like, do I have to be on the podium? Like, do I have to be this authoritative figure where the baton is like this holy gesture, or are there other ways to get good at music that don't require that?
And you kind of hit the, the nail on the coffin. It's that all instruction doesn't have to come from me. And I like to think band directors have really big egos about that we've created this product, we've seen them from start to finish. And we think if someone doesn't see me in front of them, I lose that pride and ownership of how they got there. But when it's time to be adjudicated, nobody knows how you really got there.
Everybody knows where you started. They don't. Yeah, well, right. They care where you got, how you got there, but they don't know where you started either. Is the thing? Is it's like,
yeah. And they don't have to know. It's like that TikTok. Nobody has to know.
Right.
And when it comes to enhancing what rehearsal look like, we have 90-minute blocks. All of my teaching career, I taught a 45-minute block, and then during the pandemic, and of course now we're in 90-minute blocks. And thinking about how I grew up in Prince George's County, and we had 90-minute blocks. And when you go work with the trumpets for 25 minutes, I am dying on the inside because I have to be quiet. I'm not engaged anymore. Oh, and there's that I know my part. So like, this is kind of, students can quickly become, this is like a waste of my time. And the ones who truly, truly love it will endure. And the ones who won't, that's when you kind of get those behavior issues. And so as soon as I learned that I can duplicate myself with some accountability, and it becomes a large level of trust. You have to build with your students with technology. But that trust also comes the same way that you would do it without technology. And students having ownership of their education is, I feel like that is the most ignored tool ever, is that I don't have to force you to do it if you like it. If you like it, then I cannot step on the podium at all. And I have students that will get on the podium and can effectively read the score because they, in smart music, can look at everybody's part. And they'll take their tablet and they're just like, oh, and these are like students who are beginners. This isn't like, a kid who's had private lessons and all those things. This is a kid that says, wait a minute, oh, the trumpet part, the trumpets, y'all have the same part as me, because they could just click on a tab and see that the trumpet 2 part is the same as a clarinet 2 part. And that's that cross teaching that's happening all the time when you're not the main event. And it's okay. I think the hardest thing is band directors understand it's okay for all good information to not come from you. It's actually probably better. Because we have our weaknesses, and if you're transparent with yourself, you might not be able to help the percussion section very well, but percussion were the best group section in my band, hands down, because they had so much time to develop individual skills and be held accountable for it. So shout out to percussion. Everybody always say, oh, my percussionists, oh, they drive me nuts. I said, I love them. They're my favorite group of people back there, because they'll be rigging a triangle to the stand with a Glock over here, because I'll say, all right, now go learn all percussion 1. And guess what? I don't have to print it. It's in your smart music account.
Yep.
So learn the snare part, learn the bass drum part, break drum. And guess what? I expect you all to cover it.
Yeah. It's interesting being a percussionist. I don't feel like it makes it any easier to manage a large percussion section in the back of the band classroom, because it's such a different kind of attitude about how to manage that. But there are some really easy things you can do, because what they really just need is engagement. And, there are some pretty straightforward things you can do that'll keep them engaged. That, again, like you're, making 2 of yourself. One of the things I did in combination with this whole like drone, like beat play along stuff, is I started writing out all of the players' parts of the concert music for every instrument. So like now the tuba gets to play the melody and the flute, and the percussion get to see everything. They get to learn every single part. So like every single time, like if I can work with an individual section and it makes sense to, I can just have everybody play the thing that I'm working on. And it's like way more time on instruments, way less time off instruments. And I don't know if I just got lucky with my concert band this year, but the percussionists are like not adverse to playing mallets at all. They're like, oh no, cool. We'll learn this. I also keep a drum set close by, because I know they love that too. So
And
like,
there's some key skills too that you can make engaging with, like drones and drum beats and sound trap. You can put an 8-bar loop together quick. You don't even have to know anything about that. You could just drag a bass line in the key. You can put it in a key and you drag like a percussion loop. And you can say, all right, scales on whole notes, but they have this playing behind them. For a beginner, feeling like they're making music early really sets apart that method book experience that sometimes is like eye gouging for you and them.
Mm-hmm.
I think about number 1, 2, 3, and 4 on page 4 in essential elements. It's like, oh, now we're going up. And it's ear training, but there's nothing exciting happening with those whole notes. They're long tones. I said, well, I can still do long tones with this, this drum beat behind them. And now when someone walks by, the administrator who has no clue how to create music from top to bottom, and that beginners just sound bad, and, but they hear this going on and they're like, oh, they can play. And I'm like, not really, but okay.
No. Yeah, it's amazing what blasting drum beats through some speakers can do. And it's like, if you think about it, it's like, okay, metronome can be kind of like a little boring to practice to. Drum beat, major improvement. And I know a lot of people don't want to like have, like a bunch of drummers in the back of their band, but it's like, okay, but like, really, is someone like playing on drum set really that many steps removed from a drum beat or a metronome? Like, not everything experience that happens in the band classroom has to serve the singular opportunity of performing 3 pieces live, like 2 or 3 times a year. Like, we can do quite a lot more with that if we want to.
And that's moving from the non-traditional, approach that, I sometimes have these discussions with colleagues where they say, well, students, how do you get them to play the classical stuff, the assessment music? I said, well, in smart music, it allows us to have listening parties. And I'll give them a week to bring me a list of 3 songs. And if it's within the grade range that I think we can do, I'll let a vote happen. And it's real easy to do a vote with the Google form. Mm-hmm. It's real easy. Here's the list of songs, click yes or no, and here's your name, the end. And I can pull up that graph and say, hey, 75% of the class wants to do the Cave You Fear. That's how we ended up playing it. They said, oh, this would be cool. And percussion were already sold because they said, where's all those weird sounds coming from? I said, you guys. They said, oh, cool. And I said, oh, I've sold it. But it was really out of their scope as beginners. When I say like, this is a grade 3 piece of music to someone who's never held a clarinet. But the fact that it's something that drives your attention is why they could do it, because that ownership of, if you want to do this song, you have to be transparent. I'll give you until once we get to, like beginning of February, if we haven't made a certain level of progress in smart music on these key sections, and they have those built-in assignments like clarinets, you got to be able to handle this. Tubas, you got to be able to handle this. Percussion, you got to be able to handle this and learn some different techniques that are not in your method book. You might have to have sectionals to do it. And they own it. And then the level of effort goes into overdrive, like completely in overdrive, until I would put them in front of people. And I learned to make a little blurb before assessments. And I would say, hey, they started playing in September. And people are like, what? Like Dr. Ciccone was one of the first college band directors to come into my band room. And he said, how are you getting characteristic tone from someone who's playing for 6 months? And I'm like, but they're surrounded by exemplars. Part of ear training is hearing constantly what the right way is. Something that maybe me and you didn't have growing up. We just had to kind of guess that we were on the right track based on what our band director said. But it becomes very easy to say, I don't sound like this. My goal is to sound as close to this as possible. And that's not saying music and learning music by ear. This is saying, I constantly hear what a good trumpet solo sounds like. I constantly hear what a good clarinet solo sounds like. I constantly hear what balance sounds like. and they're not so abstract anymore. And so when students are constantly surrounded about, here's the best product of what I think you should strive for, it becomes this kind of, it's intrinsic and they don't even know it. Like, it's intrinsic rewards that is the hard sell in education. No, there's no pizza party behind this. You're being driven by your interests. You're being driven by all of those things that you would like to sound like.
It's great because it's like, at the end of the day, you know, it's really, it is the kids' work that, you know, we have to account for. I mean, I think this all to myself, it's a little easier to communicate quite so directly, like in speech, when I'm working with my private students, but I really tell them lately, I'm like, listen, you know, because we've had some like GT related auditions over the past couple of months, and, you know, for the kids who don't like quite get where they want to be, I have to tell them, like, you can't like come in here thinking that like I'm the reason you're going to get better. Because some of them, you know, it's like they want some lessons. It's like, oh, we're auditioning for this thing coming up down the road. And I'm just like, I just need to make it really clear that like, I am not the one who like who spends the time with the instrument. Like, you and your instrument are going to teach you so much more about music than I'm ever going to. I'd rather just be like a coach, or like, I just like a little bit of wind, like blowing you in the right direction. But you have to, like, I guess in that analogy, the kids at work ethic is the wind, and I'm just the sail. It was the sail analogy I think I was looking for. But yeah, I mean, they have to do it. And I think the thing is like, what is interesting about high school kids is high school kids really like have like had some time to pursue some interests, and I think they know how to really like they're unstoppable if they get set on the right path and are really interested in something. Like, they will do anything. Like, they have this like obsessive quality that I really admire, where they have like, and adults can have this too, but like high schoolers have, I think, more free time. So if you get a really obsessive,
right, that's that part.
Yeah,
they have time to actually do what they want to do, and not what they have.
Sometimes a kid will play something and I'll be super blown away by what even like a 7th grader can do, and I'll think to myself, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, that is the result of like going home, and if you play your clarinet a couple of hours a night, that's what happens when you do it.
First week I assigned Molly on the Shore, it was the beginning of January, and we were virtual. And I said, let me just throw some stuff up there for the kids who can really play. Let me just kick their butt a little bit. Let me just throw some stuff up there and watch them like sit in horror. And a kid turned in their 5-minute video of them playing the key sections in Molly on the Shore. And I told my husband, and he didn't believe it. I said, this kid right now in high school is playing this better than I was a first-year music major with private lessons, studying music all day, every day. Like, this kid, I said, just listen to this video, like watch this little 5-minute video. And then there was that, how to use smart music effectively. He put a part on the loop. It was the end of the cadence in between the section. And did it like 4 times on a loop. And I said, that's how you practice. That's it. That's why he can do it. Because he's learned how to effectively use that tool, and he's driving what needs to be done. And I'm not beating him up about it. And I'm just giving feedback. It's like, good job working on that difficult section. A good practice tool for next week would be to go to every single measure before a rehearsal number and work on that in every key, because it changes keys quite a lot. Now, this kid, ear training wise, can recognize the cadence. He also can technically get through the same thing consistently the same way every time. And even better, when it's time to play this, that section won't fall apart.
Yeah. It really is that simple. It's just like the work has to be done, but the repetition is key. Doing the work. I love that. I'm sorry. I'm just looking over the doc here. There's so many things I want to ask you. Do you care if I like throw some questions at you from all over the place on this? Sure. Okay, cool. We talked a lot about we talked more than I thought actually about like student facing stuff that you're using, things like Google Classroom, MusicFirst. What are some of your favorite, I guess like either hardware or software or both, like some of your favorite things that just face you as the teacher? You use them in your own productivity or creative life, or like just things that enhance your teaching, but pretty much they're only empowering you to make the instruction more engaging.
Oh, what we're looking at right now, OBS. During the pandemic, there's all of this streaming that started happening. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I knew nothing about it. Let me be clear. I had no idea how to even begin to use an open broadcasting system or a StreamYard or OBS or all of these platforms. I had no idea, but it piqued my interest. I said, that would be so cool virtually to be able to have a new background every single class. And it has nothing to do with instruction. It has nothing to do with like the lesson. It was just like to watch their faces, and it made them turn their cameras on. Like, I don't know why. I'm sure there's some science behind it, but I might be inside of a television. And then my Google Slides would be like a cartoon version of what they were actually looking like. It's like, oh, there's Mrs. Williams in the Matrix. And I was behind a Matrix singing. They'd be like, how'd you do that? And that open dialogue. And so those personal relationships that kind of we miss in having band students in front of us, or our students in front of us in general. I started playing with OBS and I learned how to layer videos, and I had a Dragon Ball Z fight scene going on behind me. And the students are staring at it, sometimes too long, but it became like this toy for me that also indirectly heightened engagement with my students.
Yeah, OBS is the thing. Like I started using it last year when we were all virtual too, and it's almost like an internet, like a native language to them. Like they're all doing, like, watching the Twitch streams and the YouTube. I mean, I have students who I know like play video games, watch someone play video games on YouTube, and watch someone play video games on Twitch, like all at the same time, while like iMessaging their friends. Like that's just kind of the visual language. So I knew that, just at least to the best of my ability, I'm not like really like a perfectly comprehensive OBS power user, but like I knew that it had to have this feeling of like faster switching perspectives and video. So I set up a couple got a DSLR hooked up for me, and then I had this, the thing I'm looking into right now is on a snake arm, so I had that like facing my hand so they could see what I was doing on the computer, and just like being able to like switch scenes and have backgrounds and all this stuff. Like I just knew that kind of faster pace is what they're expecting. That's what that's what they're entertained by.
For my son. Like that's all my son does. He watches all this streaming stuff of video game playing. And so I learned how to have rhythm of the week behind me. And I'm just like this. And I say, all right, turn on your camera, clap this rhythm. And bad audio or whatever. Just the fact that they'd be like this, and then I'll just move it. Now this one, they're like, oh, Miss Williams, you changed it. And I'm like, yep, I did.
And this is like totally native to the experience of the internet, which is what we were stuck using last year. And that's why I just think it's such a clever thing. I mean, do you use OBS for anything this year? Because you're like pretty much like fully in person, right? Yeah. Well, not now. Yes. Well, not now though, right? Hold on, wait. Are you all back?
We're back now. So okay. We still do this kind of back and forth, which is kind of that thing where I think you can't have a mindset where you're abandoning it once you learn it. Like there's this mindset of, now I'm back, let me go back to doing what I was doing. But in this platform, we're back and forth. It's just so much unknown. When I saw teachers, I read some of the band director pages, and teachers like, oh, they told us we were going virtual on Sunday night. I never stopped using this stuff. So in the classroom, I'll show you how I use OBS. So I hook it up to the projector, right? Camera's on me, but now I'm using it for piano. Just point the camera down, and now you have me playing the piano on the screen, but we're still face to face because I can't pull kids to my piano. There's that social distancing we're really trying to be good about. I can't pull you to my station and you watch my hands. So now you can see in real time, I'm playing, and I just put it on mirror video, and it's correct, within reason, and you can see my finger placement. We started piano yesterday for the new unit. Like that's our new unit right now, is learning how to play piano to improve sight, singing, and sight reading. So why we're there, right? We know what's coming up. Kids have to make it through that sight reading room. And it's like, the fact that you have a piano, we have virtual pianos, they have their Chromebooks. You can do that from your keyboard. And we also have digital pianos in the classroom. But regardless, they can see me in real time, show them examples, and they don't have to come within my personal space or I be in their personal space. And I've even taught them how to turn on their camera from their Chromebook at their station. And then I just go down, I can listen, I have a lab, I can listen to station one, but then I could say, okay, turn on your camera real quick. Let me see you play, Ode to Joy with both hands and chords in the lap.
Yeah, this is a good idea. I thought of, yeah, go ahead.
I screen record it. There's your playing test. Done. Thanks. There's my informative assessment. There's my check to see if you did it well.
I've thought about this, but I haven't done it yet. Yeah. So you're using a Google Meet basically, but in person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is funny because it's like you can spend tens of thousands of dollars getting some sort of like keyboard lab set up where you are like wired into everyone, and it's like, well, we pay for Google Meet. It's a little awkward, but it's a tool that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just really easy. And then the Google Meet link is already in your Google Classroom. Like it comes with like a self-created link. So students don't have to say, well, I can't find the link. Like it's on the front page. All right, start a Google Meet real quick. Let me hear what you're doing in station 3. Let me see what you're doing. Because there's the visual aspect and the audio aspect. But we've had so many outbreaks. I've really been trying to and it's so hard to do in person where you're used to just going to help a kid. Like you're used to going over there, trumpets are struggling with it's something basic, even keeping the mute in. And, something I used to do, sticking it, can't do that. Like, how can I show you how to do that from here? And we're face to face.
Have you used Classroom Maestro at all?
I haven't.
Are you familiar with it?
I am.
I'm told that I sometimes am guilty of making people buy $40 apps, but it's like, I forget if it was actually 40, but it's pretty good. I mean, it's not a very beautiful app, but it puts the piano keyboard on the screen and the staff, and then anything you play in a MIDI keyboard highlights blue on the piano, and then shows that you can program it to show if it's like the intervallic relationship or a scale type or the chord or whatever. And that's when I don't want to have a camera, because actually I don't have a camera in my general music room. I could use my laptop camera, but that Classroom Maestro is pretty good. And what some people will do in OBS is they'll take just the keyboard part of it on the bottom, and they'll do that thing where you create a source. Is that what they call it? A source? You basically you just basically say, hey, just snip a little image of what I'm doing on this little part of the app, the keyboard, and then you can have a little keyboard kind of layered on the bottom underneath your head. Or you can have music on the top, 3/4 of the screen, and then a keyboard lighting up as you play on the bottom, something like that. It's kind of fun, but you can do it with a camera too.
You can just do it with a camera, and then that's back to that. I always think about the equity and access. We're always thinking about DEIA, and often the pushback I used to get from my colleagues, and I completely understood it, was cost. Like, I can't afford this, and so I had to really, especially as the music tech chair for the state, having low cost, easy, simple apps to use. And I always provide a list, and I think it should be updated. I hope they've updated it.
Yeah, you've got one on the Maryland Music Educators website, right? Yeah, I will link that, and I don't know if I told you this, but I will link, and anything that it gets mentioned on the air, I'll link it in the show notes, because there's usually a blog post that accompanies each episode.
I update it quarterly. I do update it quarterly. I at least try to update it quarterly. Sometimes it takes a while for the webmaster to kind of catch things up. But I do, if I go to a conference and I see something that's super cool, man, this is something that teachers could use, and it's $2. On the site, if they haven't updated, it'll probably be updated in February. There is a tutorial on teaching from your phone. It's a video webinar of ways you can use your phone in your classroom. And someone said, how are you doing that? I don't have that technology. I said, you have a smartphone, you have that technology. And I bought a Chromecast, and I just plug it into my projector. And there you go, and connect to the Wi-Fi, the school's Wi-Fi. My last district, I did have to contact the information, office, and said, please don't block this. It's me. And they were very willing. They was like, okay, you have no password to the Wi-Fi anyway. We just have to make sure that it's not blocked. And students could connect and show like things from their phone. So like the MusicFirst apps, I'll say, all right, you have 1 minute drill, okay? It's the competition. Identify the notes as fast as you can. And the kids can see like them, you know, and they're rooting them on like, yeah, go, go, go. And this engagement, or putting a tuner on the board from my phone and then walking around and walking the students and pushing the pitch. And then there you go. Okay, here's the C. Because on like tonal energy, you have all of that. The metronome's right there. So we're struggling rhythmically, tempo wise through something. I'm walking around the room. I might be by the door. We know we get all these interruptions in class. That's why the phone became important, because like administrator comes in and they want to talk about so-and-so. And now I'm not a part of the instruction, but I have my phone in my hand. I just say, all right, it's tuned. And they're playing a scale on his drone while I'm over in the corner talking to administrator about, I don't know, turning grades in on time or something I'm in trouble about.
Relatable there.
Relatable.
I like the Chromecast idea is good. I know a handful of people who will like do AirPlay to an Apple TV. That's never been a super smooth experience for me, but I like the Chromecast because I don't know about your students, but we have our students have Chromebooks. Like that's their like what they bring into the classroom.
What they have.
And I mean, I say what you will about Chrome. I have lots of feelings about Chromebooks and web apps and all the stuff that I'm giving praise to on this episode, but I have some issues with them too. The one thing I always do say though, that's really nice is they play certain features play really nicely together. And that is probably the easiest way to get a kid like when in my general music class, it's so project based. We're always making stuff in Soundtrap. And, you know, it's fine to like have them submit it. And then I show my speed grader in Canvas, which is cool. You'll like this about Canvas because like if you do a Soundtrap as the external tool, you can like see their whole project inside of like a little mini Soundtrap inside of Canvas. And you can basically just like page through each kid and see. So that's usually, yeah, will show them each other's work that way. Cause and then I can like go in and edit something and say like, hey, what if you had like tried it this way? And I can just take a loop and move it somewhere or drag it or automate something. But having them, it would be nice to be able to like do that maybe more on a whim, not so much formally, but just be able to say, hey, throw up your thing on the screen. And I learned the hard way that they can Chromecast from natively from those devices because have you ever used AirServer?
Yes.
You can turn on Chromecast capabilities in AirServer, and like all the teachers in the building who don't know how to project to their monitors I would be in the middle of work crunching email, and all of a sudden some teacher's screen would come up on my screen through AirServer. I'm like, how are they doing that? It's password protected. And then I would just watch, and then I shouldn't do this, but sometimes will just watch for a few minutes just to see. Because there's always a type of teacher it's like if they've managed to choose Robby's MacBook Pro as the output for their monitor, I'm like, what else is happening? So sometimes like I'll watch as they kind of like click around their computer, and then I'll go find them, and it's like, hey, I noticed you streamed to my computer. Just wanted to tell you, see if I can help with your monitor.
Like, please don't share it all. It's like the reply all for like broadcasting. Like, oh, please don't share.
Yeah, don't screen. Please don't screen share to my computer. Because anything can happen. And then it happened in band, and then the kids were like, oh, we can do it too. So they started doing it. So I had to turn off Chromecasting, but that was my lesson in how easily you can Chromecast from a student computer. So
learning management, well, I don't want to say learning management. I'm going to say the behavior management system that was a weird byproduct of Zoom, just having all students with a district issue Chromebook, was those apps that you could shut down things.
Yeah, Lightspeed is an example of that.
Yeah, and like a kid's like they're on Minecraft, and I just close. It's like, and I send a warning, hey, do you want me to close this? Because if I do, you're gonna lose some things. And they're like, oh my God, I'm sorry, Miss Williams. I'm like, there. So now I always say that I'm kind of like Big Brother. A management I've learned with Zoom is to log in from my phone and name it administrator.
Oh, that's good.
It will tickle you, and put the school logo.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
During Zoom sessions, I would put administrator in the breakout room. You want to laugh at some things, and you see them closing apps quickly. And it's like they're trying to destroy all the evidence because they really think, oh, an administrator's here. And I just call it Northwestern High School Administrator. And they're like, oh God, I'm in trouble.
That's
like,
so good.
Yeah.
I don't know why I
and
never
so
thought of that.
That was my management system for breakout rooms. Like, how are kids, they're actually doing stuff. And I kid you not, the coolest breakout room I actually spied on were two students arguing about an assignment, but the best way to do something. Like, it was like, no, well, it'll be so much easier if we put the score down first and choose our instruments. But no, you could just hit the transpose button, just put in piano. I mean, they were going at it. That's dumb. You want to work harder. I want to get this done. And they did that all the way through their lunch period. They never signed off. They were still like trying to figure out the best way. And then, so there's that we call it healthy struggle that they were learning how to do. That is going to be one of those soft skills that's going to be very useful if they have to work with a group in college, colleagues, is that here's how I would do it. And I didn't say this was the best way to do it. They had to come to a decision on what was the best approach for completing this project. And it was just kind of cool. I was watching them and it was like, oh, and they were not angry at each other, but each one had a different way of doing it. And I was like, they're both leaving the table with an idea.
Yeah.
That will be useful. And it's just kind of to see those organic things happen has probably been like the coolest thing for me to watch with students using technology.
That's very cool.
And then they teach.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like if anyone has done any data on like breakout rooms with high schoolers and middle schoolers. I did not have success with breakout rooms in middle schoolers. Like, it was so cold in all of them. I would break them apart, and then I would go into the first group, and I would just sit there, and they would all sit there with their cameras off. They would use their cameras last year, but something about those breakout rooms, I don't know.
I once I figured out, like, I can spy, I can send messages, I can use these management apps and say, hey, I see that you're sitting there, you're on Amazon shopping. Those are nice shoes. And then close the window. And it's just funny that and as a teacher, I'm like that in person. So it transitioned kind of well, like, oh, Miss Williams is watching us. And then the word gets out, like, Miss Williams is really tech savvy. So of course they'll find ways to do what they want to do. But It was just that fact. But then that engagement factor where I gave a lot of choice on assignments and choice of music and choice to work on things. And Soundtrap, that became my favorite app to use during the pandemic because I could create these kind of out-of-pocket assignments. Like, one, create an action scene from a movie, the audio. So this is soundtrack based, and it had to be an 8-bar loop. And I kid you not, like, this one, I have to share this one because it's hilariously cool. And right now they're doing peer-to-peer assessments on them. And the one is obviously a police chase, but they did it completely with Soundtrap. And I said, this is that engagement, and music doesn't have to be, like you said, the 3 pieces of music. It can be something else. So it's literally called, but the skill was to teach fade in and fade out with the track, because they just started, we just started using Soundtrap. So I taught them I used the Soundtrap videos from YouTube University, and they learned how to do it. And then they actually did the fade out project. And this one is a police chase. And I said, it's effective if you can get
Is that all Soundtrap content?
all Soundtrap. Free loop library.
I gotta dig into the sound effects more. It's great.
But the rubric did say you have to use at least one sound effect, and you had to have at least 4 tracks. And in those 4 tracks, there has to be evidence of fading in and fading out, which you heard. And I thought for it to be an action scene, the use of fading in and fading out could be very like effectively done. And that was all soundtrack free loop library.
It's wild that all of that stuff is like put into a cloud app, you know, so much stuff, so much content for them. Yeah. My favorite discovery last year was like requiring them to have a recorded audio component and like making them use the auto tune feature. Middle schoolers will sing. They don't even need to be bought into like the choir program. You'll have the shyest kid who will like, if you just like, Ethan Hine likes to say that student plus autotune is like it's like the Orff instrument of the modern world. Like it's that same accessibility of, you know, just having them kind of like scoop up and down scales, because, you know, it makes them, you know, feel successful. Like, you know, like there aren't all these like layers of work between them and getting to a musical goal. So I was shocked at how many of them, like, I told them they could, like, I'm like, it can be as simple as you say, hey, into the microphone, or you can do some singing. And I was surprised at how many of them sang by choice.
And so, like, with that kind of having to put your own personal piece, like, first you have to start with, how do we use the app? And then how do I add my own content to the app? And then how do I do it with meaning? And that's always like the end goal, is to go from, here's the basics, so you learn how to use all the basic functions, and then that creative element, that's really composition, just a different way of looking at it. And then ultimately how to make a statement with what you're doing, you know, whether that's your personal choice. And that's the standard when we talk about the social, you know, the social and personal tie-in, those historical perspectives. And so for Black History Month, I always do a piece where, and, you know, I don't know, a CRT blocks all this. That's the more disturbing thing about all that. That's my personal opinion, but I had students take speeches and put music behind the speech, and they had to find an audio clip and edit the sound bite so you got the meaning from that, and the music had to enhance that speech from somebody famous. And then they had to make a Google presentation with visual scenes that added to that audio. So that from Soundtrap, now you have to learn how to export the MP3, now put it in your Google Slide, and now find pictures that will enhance, you know, your project. And they turned out so cool. And this was completely virtual. There are some that was really powerful. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And you put it on the Google Slide as kind of like a gallery wall. And so administrators like, what did you do virtually? This is what they did virtually. And they're like, they did all of this from their house. I'm like, yep, every single last bit.
Yeah, I don't think most of the world realizes like how accessible these, even something that, like GarageBand, that's been with us for so long. Like, I don't think most people realize how easy it is to get something sounding musical with that. But then now that stuff is just all like on the web, I want to know. I don't know how, like, I don't want to assume that you share these kinds of resources, but I would love to know more about how you set up that sequence that particular assignment, because that sounds like something I would like to do. My thing is, like, when I have them find their own source material, is like that sometimes is like a little bit too wide of a sometimes I like to try to limit them a little bit more. Like, I don't know if it would work better for middle school to maybe already have picked out some audio clips for them and have them choose one.
Absolutely. I'll give them a list, like that's Google Doc, a list of, you know, orators or famous speeches, and now you just choose, and there is the audio. Listen to these and you decide if this is a person that you would want to exemplify. And then that writing piece that they always trying to push us to do, that we, you know, it has to be within the content and within reason. And, you know, sometimes they're trying to force writing that's not going to enhance what the content is. It's just like, right. Well, we need to write essays. And so now research that person, you know, give us background information on the person that you've chosen. And now that's the first page of your Google Slide. Your Google slide is now introducing this person, just like those trifold boards that you use for presentations in middle school. And now we're going to include this, but here's a list. I've boxed it in. Or for high school, I sent them to the social justice website, which had, different topics. And I said, well, this project is going to be based around, humanitarian efforts around hunger. Now I boxed you into something, but like with seniors, you can just kind of let them go. And that becomes like a long-term research project that can span the quarter, in the same way that it would if we did book reports back in the day.
Yeah, and with tools that are more engaging. I don't know. For me, it's maybe I've changed over the years because I like interacting with computers so much. But like, I don't know. I don't know. You put up like some paper and some cardboard and some scissors near me, and I'm like, get me away. Like, I just love the comfort and the flexibility of having everything in the box, so to speak. And I think kids do too. They appreciate the freedom that it gives them, the creative freedom.
Yeah. Their very first project on Soundtrap was to create a ringtone. Oh man, you would have thought I gave them the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm trying to experiment, I'm trying to have Soundtrap play a role in like the broader sort of like sequential skills that we're learning, because we're also in our general music learning a lot of performance-based curriculum on the like guitar and the piano and the drums. And I'm trying to, like tie in theory skills with this and have them all sort of moving together. But there are a lot of like pretty like standalone experiential lessons that I'm kind of dipping my toes into right now. And like I did a thing where they like chose an abstract painting on Google Images and then made they like what did they do? They made a sound collage in Soundtrap. And of all the things that have had like, I've never had like a wider variety of arrhythmic and atonal examples than this one, but they were all way more musical than anything that had like any kind of steadiness of beat or key area so far, because like they were just like so much more reflective of like, I made them like think about at least one adjective first for the and I adapted this lesson from Light the Music, who was last episode's sponsor, so I should give them credit, and everyone tell everyone check out lightthemusic.com. But this is definitely like, and then there was like a reflective piece where like we sort of, now it's like the kid, by describing in the assignment there what the art made them feel, and by matching it in the music, now we have intent from them, so we're not asking, we're getting away from the question like, do we like your music or not? Because like that's pretty subjective. So like, but now we can ask, did you meet your goal? Like you wanted it to feel nostalgic for childhood cartoons was like one of the ones that I got turned in. I was like, that's pretty specific. And I asked them like, did this make you feel like you were nostalgic for childhood cartoons? And like, yeah, I don't know how she did that, but yeah, that is exactly what came through. And I'm like, okay, so now we get to talk artistically about like, I'm not here to judge your creativity and your voice. I'm here to ask, is the thing that you're trying to say, are you getting your message out using the musical skills? It was kind of a breakthrough because I'm having some trouble with that class, getting them to be excited about it. So I was very excited to have that good discussion. But yeah, you give them so much freedom and learning. I think one of the interesting things about technology is learning are those limitations. Like if I tell kids, you're gonna like make take a monologue from your favorite movie and like do some audio edits, like maybe they're, am I limiting them in sort of like the length of the project, or am I limiting them in sort of like how many different audio clips are available to them, or what tools inside of the audio workstation are they allowed to use? One of the fun and creative problems I think of solving.
And I always give them like, the great thing kind of from Google Classrooms, I could create a rubric very easily. For this project, there's a rubric already there. Even like when we talk about differentiation for diverse learners, and then our ESOL students, and my population is about 90% Spanish speaking, 90% at the current high school. You notice their peer-to-peer assessment is in Spanish, and there is a Spanish Soundtrap project peer-to-peer assessment form. There's an English one, and that did not take a lot of work for me because Google has Google Translate. And of course, it's not perfect, but I'm more than likely going to get everybody engaged if everybody understands the language. And it had a rubric, so they do their part. So there's that peer-to-peer assessment. But then the assignment also has a built-in rubric that I put and framed in some of those things, that we're talking about. Like, how do you say to a kid, you have to use this, this, and this to get a 4. You have to use that, that, and that to get a 3. Or if you don't do this, and even, unfortunately, the infamous 0, which we don't give anymore. Having that built-in rubric can be set to, it would never equate to a 0. And just being able to have those things, built in, back to administrators, this is that fade in, fade out. Setup, student name and song title is present. File has been shared with the teacher. Hey, that's 1 point. Woohoo.
Yeah.
Drum loop, use the drum loop, is present, not present, period. Didn't critique on what type of loop. Do you have all 8 tracks? And look, you have to have at least a bass track, a piano track, sound effects, and a loop of choice. And then there's that choice piece. So when I get evaluated, fading in, fading out, all additional tracks are cohesive and add to the overall composition. Students make use of more than 3 editing devices. And that's where you kind of hold them accountable to just not doing more than that drag that you could do in Soundtrap and say, done. You pick the first, one on in alphabetical order and you say, here's my project. Well, it's that cohesiveness. Some of your tracks don't really make sense for what you were trying to do. And this becomes a scoring guide, and students understand this, and administrators understand rubrics.
Yeah, the students will do that. They'll try to just like drag in the first thing. And what I've found is like, if I do or model the assignment for them as a class and have them vote, like, let's just say, one of the like early common Soundtrap explorative kinds of assignments is like, you're going to drag a harmonic, a bass, and a drum loop together and see if they sound good. If you model that for a group of students and you have them vote on, like, you say, all right, we're going to try 16 different bass loops. Let's see which one is the one. There is always the one. And I know it's like, everything is of course subjective, but like they will usually have a group consensus on like 1 or 2 of the things that I sample, where they'll be like, oh, no, that one is like so much better. And it's like, see, this was like the 17th or 18th one, but you stopped after like trying 2. So you've got to keep working through it.
In a use of the Google form, one of their do nows or their drills was to open up a Google Doc and call it my favorite loops. And they had to find 5 title loops, make them favorites, and have this Google Doc of the 5 favorite loops from each category. And that was the first thing they did. So and I said, and they cannot be in alphabetical order. That like they can't be all letter A. And so that kind of blocks you from that, I'm going to use Anthem right. Or I'm going to use whatever first A is there. Right. And then say, well, okay, here's your Google Doc of loops. So I expect to see one from your favorites and not necessarily, and that's not said, so that's why I put that loop of choice. So you shared a Google Doc and said, these are the type of loops that you're going to use. Now I can check and say, hey, you've used that before. Maybe it's time to mix it up a little bit.
That's a good way to keep track of it. I would have never thought to even track that. I have one kid who actually jokes now. He's like, everything I turn in this year is going to have this one dopey piano loop in it. And it's like his signature. And I'm like, all right, I'll allow it. But otherwise, we gotta find a way to keep it creative. Yeah. Well, and coming back to what you were saying before, it's unfortunate to see everyone kind of jump 100% back into old teaching styles, because so much of this stuff can, and I'll say, like, I know I'm talking about my duplicating myself and all my stuff I'm doing in my band room, but like really the core of the experience is all like pretty traditional. Like I did go back to teaching in person, but I brought so much with me from last year that I don't want to lose. And I'm really touchy about this, especially in my general music classroom, because I do like, not every band director I know who teaches some general music loves general music. I like it, but mostly because we do now have the tools to teach it. You know what I mean? Teaching like American music styles, for example, without a digital audio workstation. That's like teaching in a concert band without a tuba. Like you're not using the native tools to the artistic medium. So I don't mind teaching it now that we have those things. I hope we keep them, because Soundtrap is, especially even in band, even though it's not the thing that is the putting the notation in front of them, it is the thing that I feel like gives them at least some recording capability. And we did, I don't know if you've done like Alex Shapiro has that putting the E in Ensemble project. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was like a really cool thing to do with the band students last year. I'm going to try to do it again this year as well. It was just like so great to get them composing, but where the composition, where the material was like actually audio recordings of themselves playing their compositions, sort of like moved together in a collage. So yeah, we gotta keep some stuff from last year.
Yeah, and AP on the extreme. So there's your general music, and to be quite honest, we do often feel like it is the dumping ground for students who just need that credit. And it can be like a painful experience. Like it could be like, really low engagement and really hard to like latch on you as a teacher and them the student. And then there's like, I teach AP music theory, and it goes beyond like their quarter two project, which is due today by midnight. Let's pray. They had a piano part to Amazing Grace. However, they have to retranscribe it. They have to make an arrangement of it using either woodwind quartet or brass quartet, or mixed instrumentation of 4 voices, some type of quartet. But all of the instruments have to be transposing. And how do you do that? Note flight. But here's the added coup de grace. They had to follow the rules of 4-part writing in their arrangement. That's really thick for a project, because there's understanding range, understanding voicing, understanding the basic rules of notation. And that's all what the test is going to really address. And them having reign on changing the progression and adding secondary dominant chords and borrowed chords. But you have to know even how to voice those. So this is like really good cumulative semester exam for a class like that has so much creative freedom in it. I have a student who's definitely well on their way to being the next who's who, because in note flight in our lab, it connects to the piano. He's a piano player. He can play his part and it notate, but then the added thing that he needs to work on is voicing, because you need that for the test. So in piano, all things work. But for someone like him, it's like, okay, all things work, but all things aren't permissible in 4-part writing. And right. So it's for that even high-end kid, these things really can help shape their experience. And we have voice majors in that class, as well as various instrumentalists, and them understanding the range of French horn, whereas where it looks is not where it's going to sound. And we did a transposing unit. And so now they have to put all of these skills together and present this created arrangement of a very familiar tune. And the final part is the band's gonna play. We're gonna have quartets play it, and they get to kind of be put on put in the fire, because this will be a part of an assembly. Like, here's so-and-so's quartet arrangement of Amazing Grace. And hey, audience, just send, there's a QR code, there's a Google form. You're gonna rate, that's that authentic audience, man. But for that kid, he's nervous. She's nervous. They're nervous because they're like, I don't get to just ball this up and throw it away. No, you better make it good.
Yep. Because
everyone's gonna hear this. And for AP class, that's where you should be. That's where you should be. Other than, we just prepping for the test.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way to think about artistic process too, because it's like, no one wants to have like at the end of the day, like it's the process that is the part that I'm most excited about as a musician and teaching. And yes, like we do have performance as a performer, like my process meets my audience only at one snapshot in time. But it is that important process. That being said, to sort of like put more of that process on public display is sort of, it's sometimes it's an, trial by fire. Like it's an important thing to do, to put yourself out there, but it can be tricky. I mean, I can't even like draft an email with someone looking over my shoulder, because I'm like, you're seeing the way my brain is working, and the way that my brain works through what I'm thinking or trying to communicate is probably an ugly path from point A to wherever I'm getting. But I like that. I like that idea of just having that sort of be, all happening publicly in that way. That's cool.
There's that in the audience of your peers,
right?
And that we do that with band assessment, but we don't really do it with a lot of other derivatives of music in education. We don't do that with general music classes very often. That performances in front of an audience of your peers.
Which is interesting. Yeah. It's interesting because I know that as music listeners, a lot of the families of my students are actually engaging with music more like in not only in the style, but like in the format of like recorded music, which is like the medium in which we're working in those classes. Whereas I know that like going out to see live music is for, not for me, but for like the families of my students is maybe more rare. So it's interesting, and I am definitely interested in exploring how do I get more of this, like these recording projects to be on display, even if it is some sort of portfolio creation down the road or some sort of website that highlights it. But yeah, that's great.
But the easiest way that I started doing it was sharing it with the school's webmaster or whoever's over tech to put it on the school's website, and it just becomes, here's what band so-and-so, or here's what AP theory, or it even being the background, those projects being the background music during the assembly. And that was cool when I started doing that. This happened face-to-face. This wasn't even before, this is like pre-pandemic, where the piano classes playing exams became like the audience music while I'm setting up for band. Like, and I just hit play, and students, you can hear like little murmurs, that's mine, that's mine. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. They feel a part. We did like a class recording of Jingle Bells with mixed instruments from the patches on their keyboard. And it becomes quirky, and you get all kinds of like, Jingle Bells with honking horns, and it becomes right. Quirky, funny, but they own the process and they feel included as well.
Yeah. That's cool. So I do usually do these 3 segmented things, like you kind of hinted at a tech tip, but typically me and whoever is the guests will just like share a thing. We can do it in 5. It can be as long a part of the show as we want it to be. So we'll lightning round it. I'm gonna say an app of the week first. It's called, have you heard of Deckset before?
Mm-hmm.
Very cool app. For those who don't know what Markdown is, I'll link a blog post I wrote about it. But basically, Markdown is like a shorthand for HTML. You can, without like clicking around and formatting tools, you can basically like, it's a way of in plain text documents notating like bullet point lists, bold words, italicized words, headings, subheadings, all using different characters on the computer keyboard. And Deckset is an app that is intended to, it's kind of like a lazy person's PowerPoint, but what it does is you don't open up, like you don't like have any tools for like dragging in shapes or like editing the look and the feel of it. Instead, what you do is you just have Deckset point to a text file with Markdown notes in it, and then it automatically makes super visually engaging slide presentations based on the text. So if you're a person who writes notes and you just put like a little, the way you notate separating the different slides is by doing like 3 dashes in a row. That'll basically make it stop parsing that bit of text and then like start parsing the next. And so it's kind of nice. I was noticing that like I'm using like Keynote, which is a pretty heavy application, just to simply show my band students what the agenda of things we're going to do on the day is. And so instead, I have a text file on my computer where I write that down, which also serves as my lesson plan because I read the text file on my iPad. But then Deckset on my Mac is looking at that same text file in iCloud, but making it look like this beautiful thing that I don't have to do any extra work. I don't have to type the same information twice. So Deckset, that's my thing.
App of the week. We just started ear training. Ear training is painful. And so it's this app called Perfect Ear, and you can use it on Android, iPhone. I think it's like $2.99 maybe, and it's like free on Android. But it has all these ear training exercises that students can use. And what I like about the problem with ear training, getting students to have independent practice on it outside your classroom. and how that can be shaped. So I'll tell them, use Perfect Ear app. They could put their AirPods in, and they can, do this at home very quickly. Send me a screenshot from your phone of your score. And I can tell them, I'm not really grading it on your accuracy. I just want to see how you're doing with ear training, because ear training in a class of students, you ask a general question, and there's the kid that doesn't say anything because they feel like they can't hear anything. They're just like, oh, someone says perfect fifth. So this app kind of gives that independent practice, and it's useful for their phone, and it's a way that they can study and practice on their own without me, the piano player, or having to even, do those examples on their own. And that's how ear training was for me in college. I struggled through it because the teacher would give us songs to relate them to, the examples to, but you had to have a piano to kind of do this. And all of that's in the app. And you can practice hearing intervals, and the ones that you're not doing so well on, you can go back and do them again. And that's really good test prep for my AP students.
Cool. There's no such thing as too many ear training apps on your phone. That's how I think about it. So I love it. And I don't think I've used it before, so I'm excited to check it out. All right, album. And I tell people this can be like any really, like, I know not everyone listens to albums. Some people do playlists or songs or whatever. I'm going to choose an album though. Aoife O'Donovan has a new album. It's called The Age of Apathy. She's one of my favorite folk artists, kind of part of this, like, I don't know, like folk, progressive folk, like kind of revival thing happening with lots of like progressive bluegrass and all that stuff. And I don't know, her like writing and her, particularly like her instrumentation and her band is like really, well, they just like really dial in the tone so perfectly, and the arranging is all great. And I don't know who's mixing her records, but they just like fill our entire house with such warmth and resonance. And like, I don't know, I've never heard her put out any work that I didn't like, but this is of course no exception. And pretty new album, so we've been listening to it a lot over here.
Album, I already knew as soon as you said I listen to this on the way to work every day, because I'm now commuting a little bit of a ways. I live in Baltimore County, and I'm commuting to northern Prince George's County, and I've got a lot of time to kill, and I listen to This Is Thundercat every morning.
Oh my goodness,
so every morning. It's so good. And what I love about his music is it's so transparent and random. I almost feel like if I was that good of a musician, and especially basses, and could sing, the thoughts that come in my head while I'm doing nothing is like the things that he writes. And I'm like, it's just so honest and quirky, but so rich musically. Oh my gosh.
Have you seen him live before?
No, I wish.
We saw him at I know you have to go, but we saw him at the 930 Club back in like 2018. It was like, I'm sure that like more than one person saw a live music show and thought that it melted their face off. Like, I don't know who first ever said it melted my face off. It could have been two different diverse musical experiences, but I know that Thundercat show was one of the musical experiences that merited me saying about, because like his virtuoso bass playing is very cerebral when you're listening to it on some like headphones or something, but when it's coming through the speaker system of the 930 Club, like all of the complex harmony he's communicating through all those like super agile lines is like hitting you in the chest too. You're just like feeling it, and he is so in outer space, and his band is all clearly wherever they are there together, and they're
all on the same ship. I've described, and I've recently introduced Thundercat to some of my students. Some of my students, they're very rich in like their music knowledge, because that's what they do all day. But I describe this like their generation's Parliament Funkadelic. Mm-hmm. It's just this whole different experience. It's a refreshing artist to see in a world where a lot of things are now rooted in repetition, repetitive, like beyond like the genre, like rhythmically everything's the same, harmonically everything is the same. So to have that and listen to it every day, talking about my do-rag, I'm like, who's in it? Who's sitting in the studio making songs about their do-rag? Like, it's it's so out there. And I like to think I have some students who are very progressive in their music taste like that. So it kind of helps keep me rooted in knowing that they don't like all of the repetition either. Like they have very, and they do this Soundtrack of Me project, which is how I actually discovered him a couple of years ago. A student that was part of their soundtrack, like one of his songs, and it was just like, who's this? Who's this? So just that, and you know, I listen to a lot of Snarky Puppy. They're the type
Love
of
them.
musicians I wish I had the room to develop as, coming from a classical background and really feeling like I struggled with anything outside of the classical genre. Like just the fact that they got together at their university and this is what formed, like Cory Henry, my God.
He's have you seen him live? We saw Snarky Puppy and then his quartet live the same weekend, and he followed them, and it was
he had a good weekend.
It was a great weekend. He was at the 8x10, and I don't know, I liked that show more. It was just him. He was a little more unhinged, you know. You have to play by some rules when you're in a band that's big as Snarky Puppy, and he definitely leaves room to play. But when he was with his quartet, he very, very clearly like could just dominate the music in whatever way he wanted to. It was very, very good. Because his Nate Worth, I think, is the percussionist of Snarky Puppy. He's in his quartet also, along with I don't remember the name of the drummer or the bass player. They were all on fire. So good. I can't not bring this up in regards to with regards to Thundercat. Do you watch the Boba Fett show on Star Wars at all?
Yes.
Did you see him last week? We haven't watched the newest one, but the last one.
He's such a, I don't want to use strange because that's not a good way to describe. He's very, very comfortable in his own skin, no matter what he's doing. And like, I think for me, and this is just kind of like, you know, being very transparent as a person of color. If you want to be taken seriously in your music career, and especially like formal education, you have to kind of follow this Eurocentric, like you belong in this box. And it's a little bit different now. It's starting to change so much, but just seeing artists like him be very in his own thing and like unapologetic about his own thing is so refreshing to me, because for years it was just like, oh no, you can't do that. Like, you want to be able to get hired, you can't do that. And just seeing and not just him as an artist, but many new artists now crossing genres in an authentic way, and nobody's checking them, you know, nobody's checking them and saying that this is not the way to go.
The way that like hip hop and traditional jazz and neo soul are sort of moving together in some ways is one of the most interesting things, because it's like you can hear so much of that like jazz harmony and a lot of like hip hop right now, and I'm just like surprised what catches in the mainstream ear. And I think to myself, I'm like, this is the kind of thing that it's like when people like kind of talk, you know, are like shouting at the clouds, like none of the popular music has any value. I kind of tune that out because I think like four diatonic chords can have value, but it's like, but you're also wrong, because do you hear like what's happening over here, where it's like you can hear like that kind of stuff is like being sampled, or you can hear like jazz musicians coming together and like growing up with hip hop and then saying like, oh, there's like this drum machine stuff, I want to play that, I'm a human being, not a drum machine, let me like give that like its own voice. And you're seeing all this playfulness. I don't know, I think it's exciting.
And absolutely. And I'm going to see Rebirth Brass Band tonight. That's where I'm going. And I sent my husband to see them a couple of years ago for his birthday. So it's just funny how all things have kind of come full circle. And I really love like the brass band genre. Like it's so cool. And of course we know Rebirth and Youngblood kind of really kind of put that back into the forefront. Of course, if you're like from places like, you know, Louisiana and New Orleans, like it's part of the culture, but to see it come in other places. And one of my friends' brass band is opening for Rebirth. He's with DuPont brass band, and we marched together in college. And it's cool to see him being a part of a genre that a couple of years ago didn't really exist in the North, so to speak.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So I get the kind of double treat. I'm going to see my friend perform for the first time, and he's opening for a group that I've done a lot of arrangements for, marching band. You know, like it was such a cool thing. My first year teaching high school, the jazz band did Brooklyn. I retranscribed it for jazz band because I had this avant-garde tuba player. He was completely into multiphonics, and he was completely into bebox and all those cool things. And it was such a hit. I said, oh man, this is just because it's this genre doesn't have to mean it's shaped completely in this anymore, like what you're kind of saying. So I like music that is progressive and can showcase a lot of this crossing of styles and mixing. And my students are going to be they're growing up in this, you know. And I think what a cool place to be, that, you know, you'll be able to go to college and that could be your area of focus, and it not be, you know, learning concertino.
Yeah. You kind of did a tech tip earlier. I can just like real quick say, man, or I can record it off the air if you like need to like split.
Oh,
this moment.
My tech tip for is really about phones. I really want teachers to really start to maybe be a little more okay with, you know, cell phone usage. And here's a tech tip. A lot of people change phones often, but they don't do anything with the old phone. So when we talk about students who don't have phones, I used to do phone drives like twice a year. And it's just a box in the main office, and say you just have to leave it unlocked in the charger, you know, just put it in a bag. It doesn't matter. Unlock with a charger, you know, and if they can connect to the school Wi-Fi, which in most cases they can, there's a student, you know, there's a student login. You can front load those phones with all the apps some of the apps that I've been talking about. And now that student has access to something, and now everybody's on the same playing field. So there's your access and equity. And it doesn't cost you anything. And a lot of times it's just sitting around the house, or even students have old phones. And it's not about it being the newest phone. Most smartphones can handle, you know, most of the small apps that we're using in our classroom. And then you don't have to buy tuners. You know, I have a teacher friend who went and bought a bunch of tuners. I was like, I don't want to say it was a waste of money, but I want to say it was a waste of money, because you could just download a tuner app and get a bunch of free phones in the classroom, and everybody has a tuner on their stand, but it didn't cost you anything.
My private student the other day asked me, what's the best tuner you can recommend to me? And I said, well, it's called Tonal Energy. It's a couple bucks. You put it on your phone. And he replies, oh, I mean, like, what's the best hardware tuner you can recommend to me? And then I pulled up an image. I pulled up a Amazon search for a tuning fork. I was like, this is the best hardware tuner I've ever used right here. You're not going to get a better hardware one with a computer in it better than Tonal Energy. That's for sure. All right. My tech tip is actually kind of, I guess this is somewhat of an app. I never know where utility apps fall, if they're tips or hacks or if they're apps, but this is something for iOS I really like. It's called Noir. And do you use dark mode on any of your devices? No. Where all the like interface becomes like darker instead of like, because, you know,
you mean like, yeah, I do it with Facebook, because one, you stare at screens all day long, and just sometimes that bright blue light is just a little heavy. So like my social media apps are set to dark mode.
Yeah, I like doing dark mode for most of the time, and but website content is like usually just bright white with black text, and it just like is so jarring. So Noir is it's a Safari extension, but it runs on Mac and on iOS, and it smartly takes website content and like does some trickery to make it look more appealing in dark mode. You can like, if it doesn't handle a particular website a way you like, you can like turn it off for certain websites. But
just for me, like as a parent, I always worry about how much time my son staring. And of course, I've bought the glasses, but you know what he does? He's not wearing them because, it's not cool.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you go. It's so great to talk.
Yeah. Nice to meet you too, virtually, at least for now.
Yes, for now.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. See you later. All right. I'm Robby Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for this episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in a podcast app of your choice. You can now get blog posts delivered right into your email inbox once a week. Please rate and review the show in the podcast app you use. It absolutely helps. It'll only take a second and a few taps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word about the show. You can learn more about my teaching and music career at robbyburns.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube at Robby Burns. Please consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/musicedtechtalk. All support tiers get perks, but even the base tier gets you a monthly video update with app and music recommendations and tech tips, and access to the Music Ed Tech Talk Discord community, where you can chat with other supporters and guests of the show about music, apps, pedagogy, lesson ideas, tech support, and more. It's a fun place to be. All right, and we'll see you next time.